But I realized that there have been moments, this year where I reflected on conflicts or situations in my life where I had myself convinced that I was being just logical or reasonable. And when I really dug deeper and sat on it, the reality is maybe there's an element of that, but there's also a big reality of just wanting to sort of win.
Hey everybody, before we start the show, I want to make a couple disclaimers. This show does cover a wide variety of topics related to mental health and life in general, and some of those could be sensitive for you. I want to simultaneously encourage you to be brave in consuming difficult content, but also respect and recognize your limitations. So please use your best judgment. I will never be offended if you need to skip a question or an episode entirely, but feel free to feel it out, check out the episode, and just see what happens. If you need to skip, that's okay, but feel free to give it a shot first. I also need to say that while I am a psychologist, I'm not your psychologist and I'm not your therapist. This is not intended to be direct medical advice, and you should not use this as a substitute for professional help. So with those said, let's go ahead and get into the show.
All right. Hello, friends of all varieties. This is the Hardcore Self-Help Podcast, episode 379. I'm your host, Dr. Robert Duff, aka Duff the Psych. I make mental health content for real people, just like you. And today we are doing the last episode of the year, and this is going to be sort of my wrap-up episode. First things first, I wanted to let everyone know that there won't be an episode next week. I'm going to be, taking the week off. Well, I'm actually not. I'm going to take the week off from the podcast. I still have clinical work and stuff. But if you are privileged enough to be able to spend some time with family or loved ones for, whatever purpose right now, I hope that you have a really great time, and I hope that it's special. And if you have the means to spread your wealth or your awareness or your effort for people who are out there in the world fearing for their lives or mourning loved ones and not able to enjoy this sort of holiday season, please do whatever you can. And for those of you that are struggling or mourning this time of year, I see you. It can be heavy, it can be difficult, and I just want to reassure you that you're doing the best that you can. And this holiday season is going to go by just like any other holiday season with its ups and downs. This episode is going to be my yearly tradition that I've fallen into of doing kind of a wrap up for the year. And this is where I will reveal my word for the year and talk about the past year in relation to the word that I was focusing on. And then, of course, I'll just generally talk about my hopes and plans and things like that. So for those of you who may be new, a few years ago, I started coming up with a word for the year. And this is basically what you might think of as a focal point for the year. So rather than having too many specific resolutions, which I don't really like, I think that having, these really concrete New Year's resolutions, they can be good for some people. And the beginning of a new year is always a good time to, try to look back and look forward and reflect and try to move in a direction that you want to. We are a sort of cyclical being, so there's nothing wrong with using the start of the year as a prompt to do that. But I think that traditional New Year's resolutions, they're often kind of overambitious. They're kind of unrealistic. They're things that often set you up to feel bad about yourself later on when you don't meet all of those resolutions. And so for myself, I like to do a bit of a review, and I like to think of the broad strokes of what do I want to be focusing on? How do I want to be setting my intention, so to speak, for the year, and things of that sort. Of course, I do have goals, but framing them as New Year's resolutions, in my experience, just isn't the most effective thing. And so, over the past few years, like I said, I have kind of started coming up with a word to focus on for the year. And I don't remember how this started. Maybe one of you who's listened, all the way along can remind me. But it just sort of comes to me at some point. And usually it's not something that I'm thinking of specifically. A word just pops out at me and I'm like, yeah, I think that's the one. I think that's what it's going to be for this year. So it's something that I focus on, but it also sort of reveals itself to me throughout the course of the year, meaning I have maybe a basic idea of what I am going to be, maybe focusing on or paying attention to. But then over the course of the year, it surprises me sometimes. I will say before I jump into reflecting back and all these other things that there may be ambient noise this time. We're in between raining spells. There was a big storm last night. I live in Southern California, so our weather is not the same as a lot of, other places. But for here, it rained really, really heavy. There was lightning and thunder to the point that like my kids woke up at 2 a.m. and like ran into our bed scared. And there was like flooding in one of the cities near me and a tornado warning, which like we don't have tornadoes. So right now there's a brief respite from all the rain. But there are a lot of crows out there picking at stuff that has been, brought up by the rain, and, it might start raining again. So just be aware of, if you feel like there's a crow, outside of your car or in your headphones or wherever you're listening, it's not just you, it's the, ambient noise here. Anyway, so for 2023, for this past year, my word of the year was identity. And I'll talk more about that in a minute. But, in previous years, I had other words like power, I've had mastery, and I've had balance. And it's interesting because, as I've kind of continued with this tradition, I can still feel what it was like during those years. Right. I almost have like little vignettes. There's moments in my mind, whether it's a moment when I was interacting with somebody, or a moment when I was out running, or doing some sort of work, whatever it may be. I have these little vignettes in my mind, and it's almost like sense memories. Like if you think about a very particular time in your life that you have vivid memories of, you can almost feel it. You can almost like taste it or smell it and have the sensory experience of it. And I feel that way with each of these words. Since I had so much focus on them throughout the year, I can kind of tap into that. And I feel like I can draw upon those words and feel whatever it is that I learned or gained from that year, whatever that balance or power or mastery was. And then not only that, there were things that I worked on during that time that have stuck with me. So for example, in my year where I focused on mastery, I did a lot of work to master my own body, such as doing, longer meditation sessions to see what that felt like, doing more focused breath work and training. And those have continued to exist as skills in my repertoire. And I haven't had to use them as much because of the work that I did. But now when I am in a place where I need to regulate myself, I have better tools than I had before. And so I can kind of draw upon what I learned that year and apply it now. So it's a cumulative thing, I think. So for 2023, this past year, my word was identity. And this was an interesting one. Obviously, I'm going to get, a bit personal here. I'm not going to go insanely deep because, some of this is private. But yeah, identity. I'm not sure what the circumstances were, exactly why this popped up, but it was a few months ago. And I remember telling somebody, I think I told my girlfriend, I'm like, hey, I think I found my word for next year. It just sort of jumped out to me at a certain point. And this is one of those years where, I was not really sure like where the word would take me. So I basically just kept, the desire to learn more about who I really am and learn more about what my identity and identities are in my mind as I went about my life. And a few things jumped out. So the first one is something that it's not exactly something that I've learned this year, but it's something that I wanted to get more in touch with and understand more fully. And I'm not sure if I've ever, explicitly stated this on the podcast, but I am queer. I don't like just one gender in terms of romantic attraction. That does not mean, let me be clear, that does not mean it's open season in my DMs. I know me saying, hey, I'm queer, I'm also polyamorous, is like, ooh, okay. No, not open season. But yeah, that's something that I've been able to, feel out a little bit more this year and become more comfortable with. I'm not going to go into a ton of detail here, but that was certainly a big part of what my identity meant to me this year. And I was able to reflect on and explore more about the different aspects of what, the term queer and what that identity means to me. And in the past, I think this is something that has been difficult for me to approach because I've had sort of a imposter syndrome about it and a lot of confusion about it, honestly, as anybody could when it comes to things like sexual orientation. So yeah, it's nice to come closer to understanding myself in this regard. I'm somebody that holds a great deal of privilege in a variety of ways. And I'm coming from even in terms of exploring my queerness, come from a very privileged place. So I've been, hesitant to sort of be out and, thrusting my perspective or opinions or experience onto other people, because I don't think that I have the most important voice in this space, and it's more of just sort of my own reflection. So that's why it's not something that I talk about a whole lot. But it's been an interesting area of reflection and exploration, and I think it's definitely an area of continued reflection and continued progress. And that was, a big part of what came to be my focus of identity for the year. So hey, there you go. There's something personal for you. A couple other things. A surprising one that jumped out to me, and, I'm going to be kind of all over the place here, but a surprising aspect of my identity that jumped out to me. And this jumped out to me mainly while I was, journaling and intentionally reflecting on, like, who am I? What kind of person am I? Is that I am prideful. And I haven't necessarily always thought of myself that way. But I realized that there have been moments, this year where I reflected on conflicts or situations in my life where I had myself convinced that I was being just logical or reasonable. And when I really dug deeper and sat on it, the reality is maybe there's an element of that, but there's also a big reality of just wanting to sort of win whatever the situation was. And I say win with like big air quotes, right? Because that could mean anything, but basically just wanted to kind of come out on top or win. I felt like some of my value was derived from being correct or being better or being, the one in the right. So recognizing that and trying to be more aware, I think has helped me let go of things more when there's no reason to be upset or that, heavy push to win whatever the situation is. It could be anything from a very personal, conversation that I'm having to something stupid like feeling upset or sort of road ragey while driving, right? Why do I need to win that situation? None of that fucking matters. What does my, pride have to do with that situation? It's nothing. So that's helped me a little bit in terms of letting those things go and not having that stick around and ruin my day or ruin my relationship or whatever the situation might be. So that's another one. Another negative one is that I am avoidant. Not of everything, certainly not of everything, right? There are tons of fears and hard situations and difficult things in life that I have approached, that I continue to approach, that I demonstrate, bravery for. But there are some specific blind spots in my life that are definitely points of avoidance. And I realize that I have a tendency to just begin avoiding simply because I have avoided them. What I mean by that is maybe there's a situation that sort of incidentally got swept under the rug or got, a little bit out of hand. And then once it gets to that point, I can sometimes just say, okay, forget about it. Like this is something that is going to be on the back burner or is going to be avoided forever. So that's one that I'm still working on and, growing my awareness of. It's hard to pull out of that, but I think awareness of it is really one of the first steps. I'm going to talk about a couple positive things, but before that, let's take a quick break and talk about today's sponsor. Okay, this episode is brought to you by OneSkin. So it's the holiday season, and while your gifts may have been purchased already, you can always get yourself a gift for the coming year and treat your skin well. I know at this time of year, I have a hard time with, my skin. I get a lot of dryness and my allergies are going crazy, and I can feel very uncomfortable just in terms of being uncomfortable in my skin. And so OneSkin has a variety of products that are super, super helpful. Their products are all powered by a groundbreaking peptide called OS1. And this is an ingredient that's specifically proven to prevent the accumulation of aged cells, what are called senescent cells. And these are the primary culprit behind skin aging. And so it's been proven in the lab to actually reduce the biological age of skin by several years. So it doesn't only, give you healthier, more hydrated skin, but it actually slows down the biological aging process of the skin, which is great. The whole point of this is let's use it now so that it doesn't become an issue later. So OneSkin is awesome. They just launched their mini bundles, which include face and eye topical supplements, body lotion, and a cleanser. And they all come in a really nice travel bag. So if you're going to be traveling in the new year, they have all of your mini skincare essentials there covered in one place. For a limited time, you guys listeners can get an exclusive 15% off OneSkin products using the code DUFF when you check out at oneskin.co. So this holiday season, give yourself and your loved ones a head start on the New Year's resolutions to swap your skincare for skin longevity. So don't forget to head over to oneskin.co and get that 15% off with the code DUFF. All right, let's get back to the episode here. All right, so in terms of identity, on the positive side, I would say that I've reconnected to what you might call the student part of my identity or the learner part of my identity. Basically, I've just really enjoyed learning new things and pursuing new experiences this past year. I've wanted to challenge myself, and that was one thing I knew I would do. I would try to approach situations that I didn't already have, mastery of, or skills that I haven't built yet, and then just sort of see what emerged. And I've had some chances to do that, small things, big things, everything from, fixing plumbing under my sink or fixing the springs in my washing machine, to, having a chance to learn a lot more about specific disorders and diseases and interplay between things in my clinical work by doing research for cases that I've seen. Lots of stuff like that, even, cooking, for instance. I've just kind of embraced the opportunity to learn new things. And that's, something that's always been very important to me. But this year I leaned into that a bit. And that was something that I really enjoyed, sort of reconnecting to as part of my identity. I also recognized that as a person, I am very steadfast. And that's the term that I came with. I'm not sure if that's the best one, but I have persevered through many, many things in my life, and I will continue to persevere through many things in my life. But I've also recognized that it's a double-edged sword, right? I've recognized some ways in which being that sort of steadfast can be a limitation, in that I may not recognize when I'm not treating myself appropriately, and instead just kind of bullishly pushing forward. And when you're kind of bullishly pushing forward, that may also ignore some of the nuances of a situation, right? Working harder, not smarter. And so, I think on both sides of the coin, I've recognized more about that part of my identity too. So I'm sure there are many more insights that I will glean from, this past year of focusing on my identity, but that's going to take me sitting on it more. That's going to take me going back and reviewing my journals and just reading through and seeing what jumps out at me. So that's a little bit about what things have been like this past year. Now, on to the word for 2024. Are you ready? Drum roll. My word for 2024 is connection. And as with always, I'm sure the full meaning of this word will emerge throughout the year, but there are definitely some ways that I can see this already, potentially playing out. So first off, I realized that I've fallen into kind of a stereotypical position as a dad in my 30s, which is I don't really have a lot of friends. And I don't mean that in like the literal sense of like I don't have anybody in my life that I care for that I can call a friend. I have, longtime friends that I get together with on occasion. Of course, I have romantic relationships that have a very healthy friendship component in them. But if I were to be like, you know what, tonight I think I would like to go out and, grab a beer with a friend, or, invite someone out to go for a hike tomorrow, I don't really have people in my real life, meaning I'm not online, that I can do that with easily. I can't think of somebody right now off the top of my head that I could just call back, hey man, want to go grab a beer? And that's totally on me. I've been very content to be in my own bubble during the work week, Monday through Friday, just sort of in my own bubble. And then on the weekend, spend time with my family and, loved ones. And I think I am still pretty content that way, but I do realize the value of having, a friend or two that are just really my friend, not a couple's friend or, a friend of a friend, not somebody who's essentially family, but just having some buddies that are people that I can spend time with in the way that I might have when I was younger. And so I think that opening myself up to this would require me to tap into some of the balance that I learned in a previous year. That was one of my words, remember, because, I think that friendships do take effort, they take time, and they take patience to cultivate, and that would require me carving out time from other things. So finding a balance and prioritizing that aspect of my life would be something that I have to intentionally do. But that's one thought. I would say there are also plenty of opportunities in my community for connection. That might mean being more involved in the kids' school. So there's certainly more opportunities for me to volunteer there, or maybe, following up and building relationships with other parents rather than just sort of waving and saying, hey, a few times a year at birthday parties. Maybe it will mean participating in local events, or offering my services to organizations in the area, right? Obviously, I have a set of skills and expertise that I could offer to different organizations within the area. Maybe for a broader scope, there's also, social, political, and legal causes that I would like to put more direct effort toward rather than just sort of learning about them and, occasionally posting them online. So those are a few things. Work, I think, is another area that will be impacted pretty greatly by my focus on connection. Similar to my personal life, I think that I've been in a bit of a bubble recently in my professional life. When it comes to clinical work, maybe this means actually making an effort to connect with other providers and do some networking. I haven't really found a reason to do that in my professional life, but I think it might be a good thing to do. So pushing myself to do that as, an intentional act. And for sort of the Duff the Psych side of things, I'm not entirely sure. Maybe saying yes to more opportunities for collaboration, maybe joint ventures, maybe even, being a guest on more podcasts, participating in more summits and talks, things like that. I'm not sure about having guests on my podcast. I did have that in the past, and I've thought about doing it again. The only limitation there is just like the way my life is. It's very hard to be consistent with that and find times that are reliable to interview people, right? Because I can say, oh yeah, I have some time, tonight when the kids go to bed, but what if they end up staying up and causing a ruckus and they don't go to bed until, an hour and a half after they were supposed to? So that part of it can be difficult when all my stuff is here at home. So I'm not sure about that one, but other things, maybe serving on more boards, like a board of advisors or board of directors for things. I'm not sure, but I think that, trying to ease back on my sort of automatic no response to things could serve me well in the coming year. And then, of course, connecting with you guys, maybe live streams or more participation on, things like my Facebook page and group, things of that sort. And of course, there's also connection with people that I already have in my life, deepening relationships and finding new ways to connect. One way that I'm particularly interested in this is with my kids. I feel close to my kids and we have a loving relationship, but I also want to explore new ways of connecting with them that isn't just within our well-worn groove. Things can be the same a lot of the times. So maybe this means new adventures, maybe this means new experiences, or simply really, really trying to get more one-on-one time with both of them and see what emerges from that. Oh, there's the rain coming back. Storm's back. If you can hear that, let me see. Yeah, I'm not sure if the mic's going to cut it out, but yeah, it's coming down again. So anyways, that is my word for the year. This year, I'm going to be focusing on connection. It smacked me in the face one day, and I think it'll be a very interesting thing to explore. Now, another thing that I've fallen into without even realizing it, similar to how the word sort of just started to emerge one year, is that I've also naturally started taking up hobbies and skills that have become a bit of a focus for the year. I think that this probably started at the height of the pandemic with gardening and houseplants. And that's a hobby that has continued to persist today. I continue to accumulate plants and I always have something propagating to plant later on. And so that's something that I continue to enjoy, but I definitely just started and now it's a continuing hobby. Over the past year, so in 2023, I randomly got the bug to start baking more. And this has been a total success. It's like something that I'm really enjoying and everybody else is enjoying because they benefit from it. But in the past year, I've baked, loaves of bread, like, big round bowls of bread. I've made, everything from, garlic knots or garlic loaves, cinnamon rolls, breadsticks, pita bread, tortillas, focaccia, dinner rolls, hamburger buns, pretzels, all sorts of stuff. And then I've also been taking the opportunity to just cook more in general and make things from scratch whenever possible, kind of trying to improve my culinary skills. So, I use plenty of pre-made stuff, but sometimes instead of buying pre-made ingredients, I'll go ahead and make orange chicken from scratch, right? Like, bread and fry the chicken, make the sauce from scratch, or sometimes like with pasta, I'll make the pasta and I'll make the sauce from scratch, which is lovely and it's fun to do. So that's been a big focus over the past year. And obviously those skills aren't going to go anywhere. So I'll continue to do that. But thinking ahead for this year, for 2024, I have a little bit more of a solid goal for myself. I would really like to become fluent in Spanish. I took Spanish throughout high school. So I think it was 4 years, 3 or 4, but I think 4. And I've taken opportunities to practice here and there over the years. Currently, I would say I'm at, an intermediate level. I can understand most things as long as somebody's not speaking extremely rapidly. And of course, if it's written, I can understand most everything in Spanish. And I have a pretty good amount of vocabulary. And I can hold a basic conversation with a native speaker. However, I want to put effort into really going further and becoming fluent. I would not consider myself fluent. And I would really like to be. I'm not going to be speaking the same as a native speaker, but I would like to be able to, essentially like travel in a country that speaks Spanish and totally get by. I've already been starting on this one, and I think that I can make some serious progress over the next year if I actually focus on it. There's a few tools that I'm using for this. One is the Duolingo app, which is a very fun app. It's kind of gamified. It's pretty simple, and it's not a tool that you're going to be able to use to get fluency just in and of itself. But I have been, applying a few techniques to it to try to amplify. So things like, on Duolingo, when they give you a prompt, it often gives you a word bank to choose from, and you tap which words you want to go into the sentence. So instead of using that word bank immediately, closing my eyes and doing the translation or saying it out loud, and then going and tapping that out, right? So instead of kind of doing a multiple choice thing, doing a free form response and then just tapping it in. I've also been using ChatGPT. I've mentioned this before, but they have a audio chat that you can use, and it does speak Spanish very well. So that's been a good conversation practice. It's also a great place to ask how to phrase things instead of just kind of going into Google Translate and saying, okay, translate this to this. It can give you a more holistic way of translating things. And then I've also been doing a little bit of translation in terms of content. So things like songs, like translating song lyrics from Spanish to English. And a good tip that I got from somebody on YouTube, I don't remember who, is to listen to TED Talks in Spanish, because TED Talks always have a really good transcript in the language that they're spoken in, and then a faithful, translation to English as well. So that's a really good resource. And then you can listen to them multiple times and, remember the phrasing and stuff. And then one tool that I've used in the past that I'm looking to use again this year is something called italki. It's a website that connects you to native speakers in whatever country. And, it's not free. You pay them, but, it's a decent amount. You can pay $8, $15, what have you, for a session. And you can do things like just practice conversation with this person, or they can teach you specific concepts. You can work on specific focuses. Like maybe I want to look more into kind of medical language, and I can probably find somebody on there that can help me with my, medical terminology in Spanish. So definitely that's another thing that I'll probably be doing. So that should be an interesting endeavor over the next year. In terms of other goals, a few other things, I would really, really like to get my bipolar book released. Life seems to be getting in the way over and over of getting this thing done, but it's so close to being finished, at least this draft of it. And truthfully, it's only going to take a few pushes to get it out there. So I really hope that I'm able to do that. I also want to find a better work situation for myself, like professionally. I'm not going to go into all the details here, but I am working myself to the bone way too much, and I'm hardly getting anywhere, to be honest. Part of this is that the world is just expensive as fuck right now, and that's tough, and it's tough for everybody. But I think it's also just related to the situation that I find myself in. I need to find a way to make my level of effort more consistent with the compensation and benefits that I get. Benefits being none, in a professional sense, I don't have any benefits, so I pay for everything. And that would be something that I am very interested in changing or shifting in some sort of way. The last thing is related, and that is I would like to find a way to get myself on a better financial trajectory. This has been very much drilled into me because I see older adults every week at my work that are in a situation where they're on a fixed income from, Social Security, and they're totally screwed because that's just not enough to live on. And, it's really hard to see. And I don't want that to be my life when I'm that age, or, for my family to be in a position where, they're not comfortable as well. So that's something that's definitely on my mind. Don't know how I'm going to do that quite yet, but it's something that I want to keep working toward. So this is kind of where my head's at. This is where I am coming into this new year. 2023 was an interesting year for sure. There were some very highs for me, very high highs, and some very low lows. And, overall, I won't lie, it's been a challenging year. And I think that's the case for many of you out there. And if that's the case, if you had a hard year in 2023, you're not alone. I'm reminding myself, that more than one thing can exist at a time. It's okay to be stressed and also full of love. It's okay to be tired and also present for a few moments. It's okay to be mournful and grieving, but also grateful, right? And that's something that I'm holding on to. So before we finish up, I would ask if you could just pause for a moment. If you can do that right now, fine. If you have to wait till later when you get home and you're not in the car or something, then, please do that. But take a moment and just take a few deep breaths with me, okay? Okay, let's breathe in. And out. In. And out. One more. In. And out. Good. Shake it out. Ugh. So, whatever 2024 may bring, remember you are here right now. You've made it through all of the best and all of the worst moments of your entire life so far. And we can do this. Thank you for being with me through another year. And as always, special shout out to those of you who have been listening for all the years that this show has been on the air. A huge thank you to anyone who is new and has just recently started listening. I appreciate you all so very much. And stay safe out there. Next episode will likely be a question and answer episode as usual, but that will be in 2 weeks from now. And I'll see you then. Bye.